Were you to everybody, and thank you for being here. Last month, we had also a session on the challenge of being leaders in this difficult time, looking at Teresa of Avila, Catherine of Siena, and the Teresa of Lisieux. And those sessions gave us a lot of inspiration. Today we will try to look at Edith Stein, this women philosopher, Jewish, who lived during the Second World War under in the time, those difficult times. And I think it is important to understand that always there are challenges to live the gospel and to follow Jesus. And sometimes we think that our times are the most difficult, and it is true that we are living a very difficult time with wars, with economic problems, with migration, and that our consecrated life, we know that our brothers are living these difficult times, but God is with us and with everybody. I'm trying to read the document of the Synod. As consecrated life, we are invited to embody the synodality, and one of the recommendations of that document is to read those women, saints and mystics who try to give an answer from them to their difficult times. And that's why we thought at looking at these women that lived in these difficult times. And that's why I want to welcome Estrella, that belongs to my community of Burgundy. We live together also in a time, so it's a pleasure to have her here in this space to talk about Edith Stein that you have studied, and to help us to see how a woman, a contemplative nun, a philosopher, etc., can inspire our leadership in these difficult times and challenging times. So just a word about you, Estrella. It's a pleasure to introduce Estrella. She is a missionary of the Burgundy fraternity. She has been in many places and in many countries. She's from Spain, but she has worked in Spain, Mexico, Peru, Colombia. I think that you also have lived in Italy. And in the fraternity, she has had different roles. She was a formator, general administrator, and head of the Theological Formation Center. And in this moment, she is director of the Verbum Dei Theological Institute, St. Paul in Madrid. She holds a doctorate in theology from the Ecclesiastical University of San Damaso, and the thesis was The Path of Life in Maria Zambrano, Edith Stein, and Teresa of Jesus. So, Australia, the word is yours, and we hope that you will guide us to know better Edith. Thank you, Paula. I want to say hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It depends where you are. I want to thank your presence, your interest for this session, and also to thank Paula and the UISG and your trust. If you agree, to begin, we will have a prayer that is a song of the Carmelites, and the lyrics comes from a text of Edith Stein. We will hear and see a video. Holy Spirit, eternal love, you enlighten our life. Come, Holy Spirit, and help us to deepen what you give us so that our life is enlightened with your light. Glory be to the Father, to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, and now, and forever. So, to introduce this work, I will tell you how I prepared this. There will be two sections. The first, that will be a bit longer, will try to see Edith Stein, trying her figure, trying to understand her, and will try to see her path until the moment she finds the true faith, reading Saint Teresa. Then I'd like to have a personal work to reflect and share on what we have received from this first moment. I would like to have a moment of sharing that. And then I will continue with some teachings that come and flow from what we have seen in the first section. So I will begin with an introduction to introduce the figure of Edith Stein. I would like to take the words of Pope John Paul II in the apostolic letter he wrote to proclaim Saint Teresa Benedicta of the Cross with Saint Bridget of Sweden and Saint Catherine of Siena, co-patroness of Europe. The letter was written in October 1999. And in that letter, the Pope said, about Edith Stein. She introduces us into the heart of our troubled century, pointing out the hopes it has awakened, but also the contradictions and failures that have characterized it. In it, everything expresses the torment of the search and the fatigue of the existential pilgrimage. I believe that these words continue to be relevant today. As I said at the beginning, and Paula said at the beginning, we lived travel time as it did lead. And every day when we wake up, if we listen to the news, our first prayer is a question to God, Lord, what world are we in? This morning I was trying to listen the news, and it's only about rearm in Europe in order to face the reality instead of rearming for peace. We are rearming for war. And you think that in our century, and when we thought that we had overcome the reality of war, where are we going? So, in the midst of this travel time, Edith teaches us, because she knew how to do it, to orient our life towards the light, towards a new dawn, towards meaning. She teaches us to discover a light and a truth that, coming from beyond, help us to stay on our feet, sometimes feeling, it is true, the shaking of adversity, but without succumbing to any threat. For this reason, the life of a woman like Edith Stein has much to teach us today. When Paula offered me this session, I thought about the best way to get closer to Edith Stein so that the fruits that we take from this coincide with the objectives of this session. You have received the information that was sent about these sessions and this formation, and it was mentioned among the objectives that we wanted to approach these mystics in order to learn three things: to have a thoughtful and effective leadership, to live the gospel with simplicity, compassion, and courage, and to become pilgrims of hope. Those are ambitious objectives, but not impossible. So, how can we get closer to Edith Stein so that at this time she herself will instruct us in all these aspects? And it was Edith herself who gave me the key to know how to approach her. I will read a text from her that comes from a book, Introduction to Philosophy, where she says, "The gaze directed at the life of the soul of others teaches us to know the life of our own soul as it appears observed from the outside. That is to say, when we look to another person, we learn also to see ourselves as in a mirror, because the others tell us who we are." And she continues, "Moreover, the experience of others in our psychic life, as it comes to our knowledge through our relationships with others, can shed light on some features of our experiences that had been removed from our own experience, but which become visible from the outside. That is to say, when doing this exercise of confronting others, we discover situations, experiences that we had had and we were not aware of, but that were in us. She's telling us that by approaching the knowledge of another, in this case, by approaching the knowledge of Edith Stein, this approach can produce a mirror effect on us in such a way that it can help us to know ourselves better. We are invited in this moment, in this afternoon, to reread in her path, our own path, in her process, our process, in and also our concerns, our hopes, our fears, our doubts, and our failures too. We are going to let her help us and to discover things about ourselves that we have not discovered until now. So that's why, more than a biography of Edith Stein, I would like to present a kind of semblance, as we say in Spanish, or portrait, that is more than offering data about someone's life. It is rather about offering an attentive and serene look at the other person, at the person we are going to talk about, trying to capture not only the facts of her life, but the personal dynamism that led her to discover the path of her life, that the dynamism that kept her in that path and that made it possible to move forward and at the same time allowed her to find the meaning of her life. So I will begin to share my screen. Now I will introduce the structure of what I will present. It's for today and tomorrow. First, the beginning of the journey, the search for truth as a vocation. So in the first place, we'll see that the search for truth is her vocation. That's the deep call that she feels. Second, the phenomenological step or stage, that is the path to faith and conversion. That is the moment when she studies philosophy, and that will lead her to conversion and faith. That is for today. Tomorrow, the encounter with true faith through the reading of Saint Teresa of Jesus. Then, from Christian philosophy to the science of saints. And at the end, Teresa Benedicta betrothed to the Lord under the sign of the cross, when she joins the Carmel and goes to her death. I'm not going to stop to quote the works of Edith Stein when she wrote them or what their content is, but I also have to say that since she's a woman who, according to her own words, she's constructed in such a way that she has to reflect in her works. Edith Stein reflects from her own inner experience, and her writings, to a large extent, try to understand what she has experienced and lived. And they also leave us many facts about their life and experiences. And also we have the same in their letters, in her letters. Even if she was very reserved. So now we will begin the first point, the beginning of the journey, the search for truth as a vocation. At the beginning, we see that she was a searcher of truth since she was very little. We can say that that was her vocation since the beginning, and we'll see here how she finds the way to find the truth. Edith Stein was born in Breslau on October 12, 1891. Her father died when she was just 2 years old, so her mother had to take charge of the family business, uh, wood business, and the education of the seven children. Edith describes her mother, Auguste Courant, as a strong, hardworking woman, entrepreneur in business, an authority figure respectful of the freedom of others, with great sensitivity to the difficulty and needs of people, and faithful to her Jewish faith. For little Edith, the figure of her mother was vital, and we can dare to say that the education and values that Edith received in the family and the environment of freedom in which she was educated contributed to making her the modern, free, hardworking, and disciplined woman that she was. A woman aware of her dignity, of equality between sexes, that's what she lived in her family, and also her value as a woman. That gave her a self-esteem. Although Auguste, her mother, never imposed Jewish observance to the children, she was a deeply religious woman, and for this reason, it was an extraordinary event for her mother that Edith, the youngest of her children, was born precisely on the day of the Yom Kippur, when the Jews celebrated the reconciliation. This feast celebrates the sacrifice of reconciliation that the high priest offered for him and for his people. Edith apparently did not attach great importance to this fact during her childhood and youth. However, we can say that the faith that she saw her mother lived had a wide impact on her, in such a way that later, when she was already in Carmel, when Edith offered to carry the cross of Christ by giving herself freely with him for her people, when that happened, she began to recognize in the fact that she was born on the day of Yom Kippur a premonitory sign of her vocation. She feels herself called to intercede for her people. In the book Finite and Eternal Being, she writes, What wasn't in my plan was in God's plan. And the more often something like this happens to me, the more vivid becomes my conviction of faith that, seen from God, there is no such thing as chance, that my whole life, even in all its details, is predesigned in divine providence and constitutes, in the eyes of God, who see everything, a perfect cohesion of meaning. She writes this when she was already in the Carmel. And from the Carmel, she reads her story and discovers that everything she has lived has meaning from God. Also, the fact of having been born on the day of the Jewish Feast of Reconciliation. She describes herself when she was little as a quicksilver, alive, always on the move, with a sparkling temper, witty, daring, and meddlesome, so we can have an idea. In addition, indomitable, willful, and angry, when sometimes upset me, she says, in such a way that neither her sister nor her mother could easily calm her in her fits of anger. And she continues, but inside me there was also a hidden word. Everything I saw and heard during the day, I processed in myself inside. So from a young age, she took refuge in her inner world whenever reality confused or contradicted her. And she lives that inside. And her older brothers said that she was like a book of seven seals. In her inner world, Edith reflected to find the meaning of what she was experiencing, and it was precisely this capacity for reflection that from a very young age made her come to her sense in the face of the complaints of her mother and sisters, because she was a bit she was a bit choleric. And in her autobiography, she says that at a certain moment she began to reflect on what she was experiencing and let reason have more weight than her attacks of anger. She says, I cannot say whether it was motivated by an external cause. I can only say that reason then began to prevail in me. I remember very well that from then on I became convinced that my mother and my sister Frida knew better than I did what was convenient, and that I had to trust them and obey them freely. Angry outbursts were already very rare, and soon attained self-mastery in such a way that almost without a struggle I could maintain a harmonious peace. Little by little, my inner world also illuminated and clarified. So reflection will be common in her personality, to reflect in order to know reality, to know oneself, and to find answers and valid path for her existence. A reflection to know the truth. We can see a capacity for reflection, self-control, independence, and freedom to live and make choices. All that will be characteristics of Edith's personality. She needs to think and convince herself personally of what she wants, and she wasn't willing to fill the gaps in her life in any way. She says in a moment, a brother proposed her to work with an uncle, and she says that she she doesn't want to fill the gaps in her life in any way. So she wants to know what she wants. And she says that she dreamed that she was destined to something great, and in honesty with herself, that does not allow her to decide anything until she's convinced that the path chosen is the one that corresponds to her destiny, her vocation, to the truth that she has the intuition that she must live in her life. Once that is clear, her will and decision are such that nothing can prevent her from carrying out her purpose. That is one of the reasons why, as a 14 years old teenager, she abandons her studies. She realizes that the school did not give answers to her desire to find the truth, nor did it teach her how to live and face problems, to all her questions, etc. So she decided that it was better to, to leave the school. At the age of 15, she made another important decision, and that is to abandon the Jewish faith in which she had been educated. And she does it, she says, by free choice, and writing about this fact later on. So the biography is called The Life of a Jewish Family, and she says that it was a free choice, as I said, because during that period she felt that she was the butterfly in its warm stage, caught in its silken web. The young Edith lives a time of crisis in which she looks for a way to get out of that network, to fly free towards the truth that guides and gives meaning to her life. Maybe there is another reason why she quit her faith, is that two uncles died and committed suicide. And she went to the funeral, and she says that the preach at that funeral was about the two uncles, of what they had done during their lives, but couldn't talk about a life beyond life. And so with that, only gave more pain to the family without offering consolation. And so she feels at that moment that that faith didn't mm, give a meaning or a sense. And so she says that they don't believe in life beyond death. And later on in her life, she went to a Catholic funeral, and the experience was completely different because the preaching was about offering that person to the mercy of God. And the person was entrusted to God, and all the liturgy was like accompanying the person to eternity, and that experience was important for her. About when she was about to turn 16, she decided to resume her studies, and now she will have a completely different experience from the one she had earlier. She remembers that time as a happy time because her intellectual energies were completely polarized by a task according to her. All the strength and capacity for reflection that she had found in the studied possibility of development that was channeled. The young Edith found in the studies her living environment the way to develop her full potential and the way to continue searching for the truth. After finishing high school, she enters the University of Wrocław. There, she undertook studies in German literature, history, psychology, and philosophy. But soon she was disappointed with her studies in psychology because, according to her, the psychology taught at that university was in, incapable of penetrating the interior of the soul and therefore could not give the answers that the human being needed and couldn't lead her to discover the truth about her life. So she thought that it was better to focus on the history. And about this election, she says, this love of history was not in me a romantic immersion in the past. It was closely linked to a passionate participation in the political events of the present as history in the making. In fact, she was a woman of her time, a woman passionate that loved her country, interested for her story, for its story. And we'll see other options in her life about that. In fact, from her earliest years as a university student, Edith understands her own story and destiny as linked to the history and destiny of her society and humanity. And for that, she was involved in many causes. She's a part of the Women's Association of the University that works in defense of women's right to vote, participate in a pedagogical group that seeks to prepare future teachers. She joined also the League for School Reform that participated in social institutions to know the social uh, reality and to people who suffer different situations of poverty, etc. She participates also in the Academic Society for the Education of the People in association for the training of adults. So she dedicated herself completely not only to study but also to university life, and also she had time to attend cultural events that fit her spirit. And she go, goes to say that the university was really her alma mater. In this way, it grows intellectually, and at the same time, she begins to be able to respond to the situations and reality of the social environment in which she lived. But in spite of everything, in the fourth semester, she understood that Breslau could no longer give her any more and tried to look at another place. That happens many times when she sees that something is not responding to her what she wants, she tries to search for another thing. And here begins what I called the phenomenological stage of her life, a path to faith and conversion. She will continue to search for the truth that a truth that doesn't change, and this will lead her to faith and conversion. Looking for something else, Edith discovered a book of Edmund Husserl that is whose title is Logical Investigation, and found in philosophy, the philosophy that he taught, a method that would help her in her search. She discovered that phenomenology would help her to open to reality, and by opening to the reality, she would begin to walk in the direction of the authentic truth. And she understands that in this method, the truth is what marks the direction that the philosopher must follow. That is to say, it is the truth and not its observer that marks the way. Therefore, the spirit finds the truth, that it doesn't generate it. So you find the truth when you search it, but it's not something that we create or generate. We don't own it. We cannot say this is the truth. We have to search it. It's something that is revealed. And she understands that this method would help her to find the truth. And she says, this truth that does not change because it is eternal, so that even when human nature changes, when the psychic organism changes, and when the spirit of the times changes, man's opinion may change, but the truth does not change. Convinced of this, Edith left Breslau to enter the University of Göttingen, where Husserl taught. Edith left for Göttingen in April 1913. The first visit she made to the city, that she made in the city, was to Adolf Reinach, that was one of the first students of Husserl's. And at the time, he was already a teacher in the university, a professor, and he was in charge of the relations between the students and Professor Husserl. And Reinach was married, and both he and his wife had converted to Christianity. And we'll see later that their experience of faith would have a great influence on Edith. Reinhardt had formed, together with a small group of these Husserl students, the Philosophical Society, and the aim of this association was to meet and discuss philosophical topics accompanied by Husserl. Edith Stein, from her entry into the University of Göttingen, was a member of this society, and the meetings were held in Reinach's house, and there were young students that attended with a certain people that was interested in seeking the truth together, guided by the hand of a confident director. And this will mark Edith's life. She feels the strength and the need of living with others, not only to share philosophical topics, but because she finds strong friendships in this context. Moreover, in phenomenology, she will find not only an intellectual method towards truth, but also a path that progressively leads her towards the Christian faith. Therefore, we can say that the conversion of the German philosopher, although it took place in 1921, began from her entry into the University of Göttingen. Usually people say that it was a night reading St. Teresa, but it was a long journey, and that could be an encouragement for us. And that journey began earlier. She says in a text later on that God is the truth. Whoever seeks the truth seeks God, whether he or she is aware or not. And we have seen that Edith, reason and heart had begun to seek God very early. In other words, the one who will become Saint Teresa Benedicta of the Cross was already in search of God from a very early age, because she began to respond to a call imprinted in her heart that pushed her to seek the truth. The openness and intellectual honesty of Edith were factors that influenced her approach to the faith, but it was also influenced by the conversion of some of her companions. So the witness of people that she saw and were her companions. In her autobiography, she writes, "Not in vain had we been instilled that we should have all things before our eyes without prejudice and strip of all blinders." Or the limitations of the rationalistic prejudices in which I had been brought up without knowing it fell, and the world of faith suddenly appeared before me. People with whom I dealt daily and whom I admired lived in this world of faith. So at least it was worth of being seriously considered. For the moment, I have not passed to a systematic dedication to questions of faith, because I was too saturated with other things to do it. I was content to pick up the incitement of my environment without resistance, and almost without noticing it, I was transformed little by little. That is to say, Edith, for whom the reason was very important, realized that she had to strip off all blinders and felt challenged by the lives of people of faith. And she realized that she had to pay attention to those lives and what they taught her, and not only to what she could rationalize. So experience became important for her besides the reason. Among these people were many people, some of which his teacher Max Scheler, who opened her eyes to the sphere of religious phenomena and to the Word of God. But perhaps the one who most influenced the process of Edith was Adolf Reinach and his family, especially his process from the Jewish faith to Christian faith. They were baptized in the evangelical church. One of the experiences that deeply marked Edith was the death of Reinach in the war in 1917. He was killed there. In the process of canonization of Edith Stein, Pauline, his sister, said, Pauline, during the time I knew the servant of God, she sought philosophical truth and was concerned with questions of faith. When my brother died on the Flanders front in 1917, my sister-in-law, Anne Rayner, invited her to her house to sort out the manuscripts of Adolf Rayner. I was able to see the impact of my sisters-in-law strength and the attitude of abandonment with which she accepted her husband's death. Then she understood how great and divine Christianity was. We could say that until then, Edith had limited herself to admire the Christian faith of others, and had even felt touched and questioned by those experiences. But she had not yet accepted the faith openly. However, the death of her professor and friend and the witness of his wife predisposed her to open herself beyond a scientific conception of the world, which is humbly open to faith. And little by little, Edith will experience that her mind is clear enough and that at the same time her spirit could begin to rest, a rest that comes from an understanding of reality in which new paths are opened and we can continue to move forward safely. The paths that open to her are those of faith, a truth that makes its way through the wall of the rational. But at this state, the state is not reached without going through moments in which one only advances by groping in the fog. That's why now we'll try to see some dark moments in her life before her conversion or her times of crisis. That's why I'm going to go a bit backwards to understand some moments of crisis that can be a light for us too, and also to see the consequences. Some of these moments begin before the death of Reiner, but we will see just the most important moments of darkness, because her life was not easy. So in 1915, during the First War, Edith, moved by her social sensitivity, enlisted as a nurse's assistant in the Red Cross in a military hospital in Austria, and with conviction. She says, now I don't have a life of my own anymore. I told myself all my energies are at the service of this great event. When the war is over, if I am still alive, I will be able to think again about my personal affairs. Naturally, I offer myself unconditionally. In the hospital, she will have to face the reality of young men who suffer without knowing why, and with the death of soldiers who left suffering in their homes. And she says about this, at that time, human issues affected me and inside. And these situations, together with the intense work of as a nurse, caused her great nervous tension, and she says a reduction of her vital force, so that she had to return to rest at her home in Breslau, even if she didn't want it, and she wanted to go back to the front, but she couldn't. In 1916, Edith returned to the university and resumed the work of her thesis, which she had already begun before the war. It is a moment in which this work absorbed her. The intelligence and will that had always helped her to move forward at that moment are not enough. She says that she struggled hard to find clarity in her studies, but she couldn't. So it was a time of crisis. The rational arguments that she gave herself and were effective at the times were not convincing. The dialogues with Husserl, who was the director of the thesis, were not clarifying either. And besides that, she did not share her inner situation with anyone, as her brothers said. She was quite close, with which her despair and loneliness increased. She says that sometimes when she walked through the streets, she felt the desire to be hit by a car. It was then that she consulted with Reinach, telling him that everything was confusing, so he was still there. And she said that she was quite confused about her thesis work, to which the professor replied, well, you can make clarity out of non-clarity. This simple phrase, said by a kind man who was convinced of her abilities, was a cheerful encouragement for her. So all boredom disappeared, and the professor's good judgment had inspired her confidence, restoring order and clarity to her poor head. In 1916, she defended her thesis in the University of Fribourg, and she was the first woman to receive a doctorate in philosophy in Germany. After defending the thesis, she stayed in Fribourg as Husserl's assistant. At that time, her inner situation was desperate again, and she found herself confused and immersed in great darkness again. She saw herself before it was as a one. Now she feels that she's in danger of drowning. The main reason was that she did not find in the teacher the collaboration that she needed. And she feels like someone who serves in obedience, but not like a collaborator at the level of the master who served. She feels that she's doing what she wants, but she cannot do what she wants. And she senses that there are fields of work in which she would like to delve deeper, but her commitment as a full-time assistant prevents her from doing that. So she's quite disappointed, and she returns to Breslau to take a holiday. A year later, she will cease to be Husserl's assistant. That picture is Reinach because then there is added to that, there is the suffering of the death of Adolf Reinach that I already mentioned. This death is the beginning of a long religious crisis which is sapping her strength. Edith Stein needs to move from knowing to believing because many crises in her are coming from her knowing that cannot go to believe. From some time, the young philosopher had to face her impotence, and she's convinced that the only way to cure herself of the unlimited trust in her own will and power is to accept the fragility of her own being. Once the war, 1918-1919, that the war was over, the philosopher decided to commit herself and support the new political situation in her country, encouraging other women to do the same, and registered as a member of the German Democratic Party. Now, a month later, Edith Stein writes to her friend Roman in Garden and tells him, she says, that she is fed up and disgusted with politics and that she lacks a robust aware and she needs a thick skin for that. She's completely uprooted and stateless among the people with whom she has to interact. And she even calls into questions what a new Germany is being built. So she suffered a great disappointment with politics, and her hopes were disappointed, perhaps because, as she says, she loves ideals because, in her words, ideals are the only sure guides in our life, without which we go astray. But when she wants to see embodied the ideal in politics, she sees how these ideals are increasingly distant because in practice they cannot be put into practice. Another reason for Edith's disappointment may be that having put everything into the political cause, she trusted in a result in accordance with what she had invested, but politics didn't give her what she and society expected. And so she decided to try to get a professorship, and that was her aspiration in that moment. So she prepared for this by carrying out a work of habilitation with the title Contributions to the Philosophical Foundation of Psychology and the Science of the Spirit. Her first wish was to be accepted in Fribourg, but she did not have the support of Husserl. The main impediment was that she was a woman, and since a university career was not accessible to women, and the fact of being a woman is also the reason why she was not accepted in Göttingen. However, she always tries to find a solution. And so that reason of being a woman, she felt that was not just, and so she does everything in her power to make it appear that it was unfair. And she writes to the Minister of Education, and on February 1920, she received a response from the minister telling that he shares her point of view and that the fact of being a woman could not be seen as an impediment. But this recognition is in was useless neither for Fribourg or Göttingen or Kilt, where later she aspired to be accepted. And then the second reason is that she was a Jew. But in the midst of this crisis, she begins to be open to hope. Crisis, says Maria Zambrano, that I also studied, as Paula said, the crisis belongs to the very essence of life and arises by virtue of transcendence and opens the way beyond. That is why in May 1918 she began to experience that something is beginning to bloom. In a letter to Roman in Garden, she writes that she has found a support that to a certain degree makes me alien to all external conditions. We don't know exactly what it is, but she describes between 1917 and 1919 in Introduction to Philosophy, a text that is a bit long, but I will read, even if she's not writing in the first person, but we could guess that it is her experience. I will read. In the feeling of security that often takes hold of us when we find ourselves in a desperate situation, when our understanding no longer sees any possible way out, and when we already know that there is no person in the whole world who has the will or the power to advise and help us, then in this feeling of security, we become aware of the existence of a spiritual power that no external experience teaches us. We do not know what is going to become of us. An abyss seems to open before us, and life drags us forward because life goes on and does not tolerate any step backwards. But when we think we are going to plunge into the abyss, then we feel in the hands of God, who sustains us and doesn't let us fall. And in such an experience, not only the God's existence is revealed, but also what He is, His essence, becomes visible, His radiations, the energy that supports us when all human energies fail, when we think that we are dead internally, that strength gives us strength. That energy belongs to an all-powerful being. The confidence that makes us admit that our life has a meaning, even if human understanding is not able to see it, but that makes us know divine wisdom, and the confidence that this sense is a sense of salvation, that everything, even the most serious, is finally at the service of our salvation, that this supreme being has pity on us when men abandon us, and that this being knows no depravity in all this shows us what his total goodness is. This is not an autobiographical text, but knowing that her reflection comes her life, we can think that is her own experience, an experience that that is very strong, is the presence of the grace of God in her fragility and impotence. Now, I would like to see another element that helped her to find the Catholic faith, looking for a great love. She always was very intellectual, and even in the Carmel, she continued to write, but it doesn't mean that she didn't have a heart. She was looking for a love also. Even if she didn't talk about her inner world. She said that it was secretum meum. However, she leaves us testimony of the desires and hopes she has, and she in the face of love. In the midst and together with all the dedication to work, I kept the hope in the depth of my heart for a great love and a happy marriage, without having the slightest idea of the doctrine of Catholic faith and moral. I lived the ideal of Catholic marriage. I had the feeling that among the young people I was dealing with, there was one who attracted me, and I imagined him as my future life partner. But hardly anyone could notice this, and so I must have appeared to most people as cold and approachable. I also liked Hans Bieberstein, but from the beginning, I saw for sure that it was not a possibility because I perceived Erna's inclination towards him very clearly. So Hans Bieberstein at the end married his sister Erna, but not only Hans Bieberstein. It seems that Roman Ingarden also had a prominent place in her. Throughout her life, she had a correspondence with this philosopher, and other friends of Edith Stein appear in her letters as people who attracted her. And she did not reveal the reasons why she never managed to consolidate a love relationship. Some authors believe that this was because of her character or her intense intellectual dedication, but I personally do not think that this was the reason, because she had time to cultivate great and deep friendships, uh, including Adolf Reinach and his wife Anne, and, and many other friends. So she had friendships, as we said, the friendship with Adolf Reiner and his wife, Anne, Pauline Reiner, Erika Gott, and Lily Berg, who were fellow students, Edwig Conrad Martius, a good friend and godmother at her baptism, and Roman Ingarden, Hans Liszt, many others. So she dedicated time to all of them, also to share moments of leisure. But what we do know for sure is that she wanted a great love and a happy marriage. I am inclined to think that one of the reasons why she did not manage to strengthen a relationship was the high ideal of love that she had. She was an idealist because she believed that ideals are the right guides to avoid getting lost on the path of life. But when the ideal and reality are not the same, she keeps the hope of finding the ideal. The philosopher will experience the force of passion in her life, which is why sometimes, and she writes to Roman Garden, that she had to unite head and senses to repress her heart and keep it on the right path until she found what she was looking for. Edith tries to find the, the coincidence between ideal and reality. And when she doesn't find it, so she keeps looking for the ideal. It was what happened with the politics. That's my opinion. Edith Stein tells in her autobiography an experience. She's saying that she will finish in a bit. She says in her autobiography, she tells an experience that seen from the perspective of the search of a great love, that this may be the first intuition that that love can be elsewhere. She recalls that in 1916, on a trip to Frankfurt, she entered the cathedral with her friend Pauline. She says, we entered the cathedral for a few minutes, and while we were there in respectful silence, a lady came in with her basket from the market and knelt on a bench to say a short prayer. This was something totally new for me. In the synagogues and Protestant churches to which I had gone, it was only for religious services, but here anyone in the middle of the daily work would come to the empty church as if it was for a confidential dialogue. I couldn't forget this. This experience left a mark on her that she couldn't forget. Probably that moment made her see that there were people who had in another their confident friend and heart. And she's beginning to discover a new facet of religious experience, a God with whom one can speak confidentially, someone in whom we can open our hearts. Little by little, the philosopher opens herself to others' path to reach the truth of her own existence and the authentic love that the heart desires. But also, divine providence will make its way, and we'll continue to see that tomorrow. So, thank you for listening. This presentation, and now it's 3:20. We'll have a moment of silence, but I would like to ask you that meanwhile you can think this. I said that after the presentation, I would like to have a moment to see the tools that she offers us uh, in order to have a leadership that is reflective and efficient, how to live the gospel, and how to be pilgrims of hope. So those were the objectives of this moment. So now I would, in these minutes, I don't know how many, 10. 10 minutes. Okay, so 5 minutes of silence for the. So what time? Okay, we will come back at 3:30 and we'll have 10 minutes to share our reflection and the elements that Edith can give us to live the objectives of these sessions. And then I will finish with some elements that seemed important to me. So now 10 minutes to rest and to think on the three objectives of this session. So we come back. So I invite those who wish to write in the chat. If you wish to write on the chat or to talk shortly in order to share the answer to the question, what elements that does Edith Stein give us to live a reflective and hopeful leadership? If you wish, you can raise your hand. I'm sorry if I was a bit late, but there are two important aspects. One was that she reflects from her own experience and also to accept the crisis and to be able of giving a name to our crisis. In the chat, there is a sister who says in French that Edith is an inspiring figure for many through her intellectual capacity and deep spirituality. She offers an example of faith. If there is another sister, okay. As, okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm. Thank you very much, Estrella. You are really an inspiration for us. But I didn't think so much at Edith as a leader, but as a woman, as an example for our formation today and the new women in our religious life today. And I feel that this is very important. The conflict that many women today have in front of our reality. And I think that Edith is an example for our young women who in our formation. Thank you. You can open your micro. Thank you. It was very interesting. And mainly, I keep that in this world that where there are so many ideologies, her openness, her openness to receive the truth from others is an inspiration. Thank you very much. Thank you for this beautiful presentation of Edith Stein that I admire. And the feature that I keep for leadership is that when she begins the journey, her inner journey, she accepts her vulnerability. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much, Estrella, for your conference. And I find a lot of things, but I will try to limit myself. First, the capacity of searching the truth from the beginning to the end. It's true that there are crises in the journey, but she keeps going. And I think that is extraordinary for us in consecrated life, but for everybody. Continue to search the truth. And then the capacity of reflection in the different situations where she is and try to see and to reflect, but she always keeps trying to find the truth until she finds it. This fidelity seems to me so important, and it's important also for our leadership and the experience of the gospel too.
Hello, and thank you very much for this magnificent conference. I'm very touched by the witnesses that touched Edith Stein herself. You highlighted some of these. These are things that can seem very far, but however, like for instance, when Reinach died, her friend, she was very much touched by his wife and the testimony of his wife, who showed strength in faith. So exactly like the story you told about the woman who enters the church to pray from the market, the woman with the basket coming from the market. So she was really touched by those people, and sometimes our witnessing is much more important than all the books we read, conferences we follow, everything. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for this reflection. I find Edith's capacity extraordinary to be able to see in everything happening to her a path to development and growth in faith. Whatever she lived, experienced, heard, and people she met, including the times of crisis when she had difficult times and was not sure. So she lived through all these paths that will lead her really to observe faith. And her positions are of a great significance to us today in our path of formation and in our seek to understand and live leadership in our communities. Thank you.
You have reached, okay, there is another sister.
So, thank you. Thank you very much. I thank Sister Estrella for the presentation. It was very clarifying. I echo what the other sisters said, but I would like to underline something that stunned me personally, and that's the coherence that exists in Edith's life. The coherence between her inner life and her external life. What she sees on the outside and what she lives on the inside, they form one unity and they allow her to move forward. And I see that for a leader and for us, it's an invitation to be attentive to what is happening on the inside of us and on what is happening outside of us, even if we believe sometimes that it's or about details, just details, sometimes God's will comes to us through details that we do not pay enough attention to. So she was attentive to everything, and I see that this coherence in her life is very important. Thank you.
Estrella, you have shared many things, and the sisters have shared many things. So I give you the word. I will share my screen again. Yes, your feedback gives me a lot, and even things that I hadn't thought. For example, the example of Edith for our formation, and that's something worth to deepen, to be deepened in another moment, because I think it's important, her example. So for our formation, because she wrote also on the formation of women. What I wanted now to share is what my own conclusions. For sure, you will have other conclusions, but three teach three elements that we can learn from each objective. For our reflective leadership, I find three tools or instruments. The first, to reflect in order to know reality and thinking with the heart. I will develop a bit, I don't know the time I have. You will tell me, Paula. For Edith, this is in our soul, there is God, and that's why our thought our comes from there, from the mystery of life, in such a way that not only our reason is occupied by conceptual issues, but also what we feel with emotions that apparently have no rational reasons. They are free thought because they are coming from our heart. A leadership that is reflective, that caught my attention. The reflection of a leader cannot be a cold reflection, but a reflection where our heart and mind are together to find the best for others. A second element that you have already mentioned, the passionate search for the truth that does not change, that guides us and keeps firm on the path. This truth is the goal to be reached, a truth that doesn't change. She is aware that the path to truth is an infinite process that is never reached, but that we can move forward. What is this truth for Edith? It is the truth about the human being, what we are, what we should be, and how to reach human fulfillment. And trying to find this, we will find God. I will quote a text. Within man or human being dwells the truth. This truth is not the naked fact of one's existence in its finitude, but the fact of the eternal being that underlies the fragile self-being. This is the truth that is found when you get to the bottom of yourself, when the soul knows itself and recognizes God within it. And to know that what it is there, it is only possible by the divine light. A sister put it in the chat. If we can consider Edith Stein as a leader, it is because she was always in this journey of searching the truth. And what does the world in which we live think about the truth? For our world, everything is relative. The truth depends on each one, each person, each social or political group. We have, or they have, the truth. And that is why a leadership like that of Edith Stein is urgent. A leadership of someone who maintains a simple and faithful attitude, because she has understood that the human being does not generate truth through his or her reason, but that reason can be found when the person places herself in front of reality with an attentive spirit, empty of ourselves, because the truth is God Himself. A leader must keep herself simply and faithfully putting her whole being waiting for the truth that is revealed. And at the third point in this tool for leadership, I put conviction, decision, and conviction in the options of life. Edith has a personality that does not let herself be carried away or put in question by the opinion of others. She says that until she's convinced of something, she does not choose that, even if it's presented as something very important or even necessary. Even today in our societies, we are continually presented with 1,000 attractive offers to fill our gaps, to satisfy our searches, promising peace. We have to discern whether these offers are really the choices that lead us to realize the life project that we have freely chosen. The leader has convictions, makes choices, looks for right path and stays on them. As the sister said, it's to be coherent, consistent in our life. Now, tools or instruments to live the gospel with simplicity, compassion, and courage. The first is to live from our inside. It considers that the human being is not hollow, but inhabited by a soul and governed by an inner self. And it is in the center of that soul that the human being finds the most authentic of herself. And that is the place of encounter with the one who does not who sustain us. And in the face of superficiality, Edith proposes the inner life, seeking and bringing out our inner beauty. Another point that seems to me interesting is empathy. I couldn't talk about her doctoral thesis, but the empathy was the theme of her thesis. But also it's her way of putting herself in front of others. Empathy is the experience that, although it is not original in me, I make of the experience that is original in another person. So it is a way, as we say, putting in the shoes of another, living with the shoes of another, or it is a profound way of encountering others, understanding them authentically. And you cannot live the gospel without this empathy and freedom and risk. For Edith, the freedom of the person is something sacred, the place from which the subject can become a person. But freedom is empty if it does not have a direction to walk towards, because freedom is the capacity that will decide the destiny of the human being. And that is why, in order to gain her life and soul, she says the subject must bind herself or himself to another kingdom, to a transcendent being, the Spirit of God, who gives the human being his true measure and her dignity. The direction of our freedom is given to us by another one, by God. Many people today live their freedom without a horizon, without a compass, or with a compass that has lost its function and points out different points without order. So that the boat is in the middle of the sea, disoriented and without knowing where the safe harbor to which it has to go is. And finally, to be pilgrims of hope, she can help us also in this context of the Jubilee, in order to be pilgrims of hope. The first that you have mentioned is to accept the crisis that opens up to hope. A crisis prepares the human being to make him see that we are living a certain alienation or acting from a fictitious character or playing a role. The crisis makes us discover that there is someone who remains under a mask, which makes us someone different from what we should be for others. But the crisis also prepares us to learn to live from our truth and recognizing that we are poor without seeking a splendor that does not correspond to us. However, this process is not a quiet process, because sometimes we can get to consider that being born is a tragedy, and in the crisis the path disappears and failure, emptiness are experienced. But if you or we endure the pain, what happens? It happens what happens to the flower. We have to accept the death as a part of our life. It is necessary to twin death and life. So to be pilgrims of hope is to accept the crisis knowing that it has not the last word. And two short points, be tireless in the search for a great love. Edith teaches that the search for truth and the search for a great love touch, because seeking the truth is not seeking something, it is not seeking a science, but those who seek the truth seek to satiate their hearts. The pilgrim of hope seeks for a great love, and to finish, to believe in a future sustained by another one. The experience that gives hope and makes it work is the experience of feeling supported, of feeling in someone's hands, of experiencing that in herself, someone else is the support and foundation of her life. A support and foundation that we can trust because it is someone different from myself. It is someone different and to my fragility, and it is why I can hope and walk in hope. Okay, and with this I have finished. Thank you very much for your patience, for your attention, and for listening, and your contribution also that you shared in the chat, that also will help me to continue deepening this Stein. Tomorrow we'll have the second section. Thank you. As you can see, you can take it if you want. Yeah, if you can do it for me, thank you. Thank you for your preparation. Please don't open the micros. Thank you for your preparation. And something I had is that there is such a richness in our tradition with these mystics, with these saints women, that is it's beautiful to deepen this. I realized that this woman encouraged my faith, and I think we have always had this experience of seeing normal women that help us. And that's something we have to thank to some saints, that they have been normal people. Sometimes we see only the great aspects, but she had all the different aspects of friendship, of crisis, of the university, of somebody wrote that we are in a very difficult moment. We know it is time today, but she couldn't see the influence of her life. So we have to make to ourselves this question: what is the truth? What is the human being? What we are called to be? And how she found everything in God. So I invite you also to keep this in our inner life, in our inner self, and to be faithful to what is little and what is big. And so tomorrow, Estrella will continue and will be able of knowing better what she was and what she is. So when we have the videos ready, we'll put it in the online.
Also,
Now you can open your micros. See you tomorrow.
you. Thank you very much. May God bless you.